The final divorce decree was not signed by your sweetheart. One covert witness then emerged. Before anyone could figure out why your soulmate's hand had stopped moving, something in the courtroom changed. They were in control of the eventual divorce decree. The lawyer next to them muttered, "It's time," as the signature line waited in complete quiet. Every face in the room had the same expectation. This was meant to be the conclusion. One last walk through different doors, one closed file, one signature. However, your soulmate did not pick up the pen. Rather, they gazed at the vacant witness seat as if an unseen person had just brought up a pledge they had been attempting to forget for months. The judge bent over. "Is there an issue?" The query was silently reiterated by your soulmate's lawyer, but no response was received. Their breathing shifted. Their gaze shifted to the rear of the courtroom, then back to the paper. They had been telling everyone they were prepared for weeks. They had returned old items, put up photos, and practiced uttering your name without showing emotion. However, now that freedom was just a few inches away, they appeared more like someone discovering they had been given the incorrect ending than someone fleeing a traumatic chapter. They didn't hesitate to sign, so hold on to this moment. They had found out about it less than an hour before the hearing started. Inside the folder behind the divorce papers was a little envelope with no return address. Your partner had discovered it on the courtroom steps, delicately put under their car's windshield wiper. They initially thought it was just another court order, but it contained a picture that was shot the night your relationship started to fall apart. The picture depicted you conversing with the person your soulmate thought you were covertly picking over them while standing outside a downtown eatery. Months of mistrust had been stoked by that one scene. It had transformed ordinary distance into proof and unresolved doubts into charges. However, the picture showed a detail that had never been brought up. Another person carrying a phone and observing the interaction was reflected in the restaurant window. Your soulmate's hands were shaking from studying that reflection. You both trusted the person in the glass. Someone who repeated intimate talks, sent messages, and said they were keeping your connection intact. Every miscommunication appeared to be different all of a sudden. The discussion you claimed had never taken place, the missed call, and the changed message. At last, your soulmate realized that the marriage had not failed because love had vanished. Someone had carefully managed what each of you thought of the other, which is why it had fallen apart. Nevertheless, a divorce could not be prevented by a single snapshot. Facts, not feelings, were what the judge required. Your soulmate cautiously put the unsigned order aside and stated, "I need more time." A murmur traveled across the courtroom. Their lawyer appeared astonished. The judge's face stiffened as he was about to reject the request, but then the massive doors behind you opened. With a sealed phone in one hand and a courthouse visitor ID in the other, an elderly woman entered. She appeared anxious but confident. The moment they recognized your soulmate, they became pale. She had been employed by the individual in the picture. She had witnessed the messages being altered. The strategy had been told to her. And she had finally made the decision to be honest after being silent for months. However, before she got to the witness chair, she turned to face you and said something that nobody in the room was ready to hear. Even the sound of the witness's footfall reverberated over the polished floor as the courtroom fell silent. She turned to face you after carefully placing the covered phone on the clerk's desk, drawing attention from everyone. The space seemed smaller despite the calmness of her voice and the weight of each syllable. "You were never the person they were told you were," she remarked, glancing from you to your true love. "I was frightened of losing my job, so I said nothing." But those few words suddenly altered the mood. "But I can't live with that silence anymore." With increasing bewilderment, the lawyers who had come anticipating a standard hearing started leafing through their notes. Your lover stood motionless, unable to turn away. The witness clarified that she had collaborated extensively with the mutual buddy who was universally trusted. She had personally witnessed screenshots altered to provide misleading impressions, heard private conversations twisted into stories that sounded plausible enough to drive a wedge between two individuals who had once fully trusted one another, and seen messages vanish before they reached you. The courtroom realized this was no typical divorce proceeding after what transpired next. The sealed phone held original recordings that had never been tampered with, timestamps, and stored conversations. It was the first time that the whole story could be seen as it had actually occurred. Keep going, because the next revelation showed that the greatest misconception had not yet been identified. A sequence of messages appeared in chronological order as the phone was linked to the courtroom display. The room was filled with silent gasps. Whole talks had been rearranged. The number of friendly texts had decreased by half. Arguments that never existed had been created by combining your words with ones from entirely different eras. Even your soulmate's own comments had been intercepted before reaching you, leaving both of you convinced that the other had chosen quiet over honesty. Then the witness disclosed something that nobody had anticipated. Something about the situation had never felt right, so months before, she had surreptitiously downloaded the original data. She never thought it would be the secret to preventing a marriage from dissolving permanently. As memory after memory began to make sense, your love slowly sank into their chair, their eyes growing incredulous. Every chilly farewell, every unanswered apologies, every agonizing miscommunication. Someone who stood to gain from keeping you apart had meticulously crafted each one. If this tale resonates with you, think about telling it to someone who still feels that a single miscommunication must be a final farewell. Additionally, subscribing enables you to find additional trips where hope endures if stories about second chances resonate with you. However, one more piece of proof was still waiting within that phone, so don't leave just yet. Just when everyone believed the truth had finally been disclosed, the witness opened a folder called Unsent. There were numerous messages sent by your partner that you were unaware had not reached you. Birthday greetings, late-night apologies, words of support during trying times, and one note written at 2:17 a.m. were all included. That simply stated, if you still believe there's even one reason to fight for us, I will be standing here waiting. Your soulmate covered their face, overcome by the revelation that you had never disregarded those messages since you had never received them. Instead of granting the divorce filing at that very moment, the judge silently closed it. The lawyers fell silent. Even the onlookers felt that they were seeing something much more significant than a court case. The witness then took out a small handwritten notebook from her suitcase one final time. "There's something else," she said. The individual who deceived you both kept a notebook in which they detailed their reasons for wanting to break up with you. Knowing that whatever was written in those pages would either mend the deepest wound between you or reveal one last secret that could alter everything forever, your soulmate slowly raised their head. The peaceful lakeside cafe where your love had asked to meet you was softly illuminated by morning light. It wasn't a lavish location. It was the same little area where the two of you had once spent hours talking about dreams that felt unachievable at the time. The smell of fresh coffee, the familiar wooden tables, and the soft sound of the water against the dock brought back memories that neither of you had anticipated. With the faded movie ticket in one hand and a tiny envelope in the other, your lover showed there early. There was no waiting dramatic speech, no attempt to use flawless language to erase the past. Rather, they acknowledged something that caught them off guard. Before either of you could respond, an old man with a kind grin walked over to the table. "I kept thinking I was remembering our story," they stated softly. "But I was really remembering the version someone else built for me." He identified himself as the cafe's retired owner, apologized for disturbing you both, and claimed to have recognized you both as soon as you entered. He briefly vanished before reappearing with an old guest book that patrons had signed years before, opening a faded page, and pointing to a note you two had written on your first visit. The silence that followed was no longer uncomfortable. It felt like two hearts finally hearing the truth without anyone standing between them. Hold on to this because the next discovery turned a forgotten promise into something neither of you could ignore. No matter how hard life gets, may we always choose one honest conversation over one painful assumption. Neither of you remembered writing it until that precise moment. After your last visit, the owner of the cafe told you that he had discovered a small velvet pouch behind the booth where you had been seated. Since there was no name on it, he kept it securely in the hopes that someone would someday come back. Years went by, and countless patrons came and went. But something told him not to discard it, and now that he recognized your faces, he thought it had at last found its rightful owners. Inside the pouch were two matching keychains engraved with the same straightforward words, "Find your way back." Your soulmate grinned through tears, recalling that they had secretly planned to surprise you with them after resolving a conflict the two of you had been resolving. Even though everything else seemed to be falling apart, it was impossible to deny that hope had existed when you looked at those unopened gifts, and then your soulmate slid the unopened envelope across the table. The surprise never happened because the misunderstanding started just days later, sending your lives in completely different directions. "This isn't an apology," they whispered. "It's a letter I wrote the night before the divorce hearing after seeing that photograph. I promised myself I would only give it to you if the truth finally came out. If this journey has reminded you that real trust deserves patience, consider sharing it with someone who believes broken communication can never be repaired. And if stories filled with hope and unexpected turns speak to you, subscribing helps you discover more unforgettable journeys like this one." You slowly unfolded the letter, expecting regret. But what you found instead was remarkable honesty. Every page described moments your soulmate had quietly treasured. The first time you laughed together, the road trip that nearly went horribly wrong but turned out to be one of your favorite memories, the evenings when everyday conversation seemed extraordinary, and a sentence near the end of the book that made time seem to stop. "If life ever gives us another chance, I don't want a perfect relationship. I only want an honest one." Before either of you could say anything, a courthouse assistant rushed over to the cafe with an official envelope marked for immediate delivery. The judge had reviewed all of the recently uncovered evidence and made an unexpected decision. Instead of setting up another divorce hearing, the court had ordered an independent investigation into the manipulation that had shaped the entire case, putting all legal proceedings on hold until the whole truth could be established. The assistant continued, "There's one more thing. as she handed you a second sealed package that had arrived anonymously just minutes earlier and included 8 indelible lines written across the front in meticulous calligraphy. Your sweetheart glanced at you with a quiet sense of relief, but she wasn't done. Even the courthouse assistant acknowledged that she had no idea who had delivered it. There was no return address, no visible fingerprints, just those 8 eerie words across the front, and the anonymous envelope lay between you and your soulmate for several long seconds like the last scene of a movie, neither of you ready to watch. This is the biggest truth that hasn't been revealed yet. The letter started with a sentence that instantly changed the mood. If you are reading this, then the truth has survived longer than the lies. The writer never gave their name, but every line suggested they had watched the entire story unfold from the shadows. Your soulmate slowly broke the seal, revealing a single handwritten page along with a small flash drive attached with transparent tape. They clarified that the manipulation had gone far beyond simply changing messages. Crucial emails had been rerouted, invitations had subtly vanished, chances for unintentional reunions had been cancelled before either of you even realized they existed, and there had been birthdays when you both thought the other had decided not to attend. The letter claimed that the flash drive contained security footage from various locations over several months, showing instances where fate had brought you within a few feet of each other repeatedly, only for someone to intervene at the last minute. There had been weekends when one of you had to wait for a call that had already been blocked before it could ring. Before you turn away, keep in mind that sometimes the biggest mystery isn't why two people drift apart, but rather how many opportunities they unintentionally had to reunite. When the footage was finally viewed, each clip seemed more surreal than the last. There you were, walking into a bookstore just moments after your soulmate had left. A holiday market video showed you both standing less than 20 feet apart, separated only by a crowd and one well-timed phone call that sent your soulmate somewhere else. Another recording showed your soulmate waiting at an airport cafe while your delayed flight announcement sent you to the gate just minutes too early. The witness covered her mouth in shock when she saw familiar faces in multiple recordings. None of these moments had been coincidences. The timestamps matched the records already discovered during the investigation, and whoever had planned the misunderstandings had also discreetly rerouted real-life encounters whenever possible. Your soulmate leaned back, shaking their head with a quiet smile that carried both hope and sadness. "We kept thinking destiny had abandoned us," they whispered as the judge's investigators quickly confirmed that the material looked authentic and would be included in the official review. The emotional weight became nearly impossible to ignore. If this story has reminded you of how powerful truth can become when it finally finds its voice, we'd love to have you join us for more unforgettable journeys. If stories of hope, second chances, and unexpected discoveries are on your watch list, please subscribe and leave a comment. Perhaps destiny kept bringing us together and we just didn't realize it. Everyone's focus shifted to the last page on the flash drive as the sun started to set outside the cafe windows. Unlike the videos, this file only included a typed message that was set to appear automatically after each clip had finished playing. It said, "Love doesn't always disappear." A reservation confirmation for a peaceful cabin overlooking the mountains was revealed when the file opened. Your soulmate silently asked if you were ready, and you nodded. Sometimes it just gets buried beneath enough confusion that two good people stop recognizing each other. There was no signature, no explanation, just one last attachment labeled "Open Only Together." A simple note from the cabin owner, "We've been waiting for the day you would finally arrive together," was attached to the confirmation of a trip the two of you had dreamed of but thought had been permanently cancelled. The reservation had never really been cancelled, but it had been postponed year after year under anonymous instructions that had now expired. For the first time in years, your soulmate grinned peacefully. However, as you both got up to go, the courthouse assistant's phone rang. She listened for a few seconds before looking up in shock. The investigators found the person who sent the anonymous envelope, she whispered. And they say your narrative isn't finished yet, which is why they want to meet you both tonight. It has only just begun. As you and your soulmate arrived at the quiet address the investigators had given, night fell softly over the city. It was a small historical library nestled between two old brick buildings, a place where stories had been preserved for generations, rather than another courthouse or police office. The sender, who identified themselves as a former digital record specialist who had unintentionally come into contact with the manipulation months before anyone else suspected it, stood slowly as you entered, not with the confidence of someone seeking attention but with the relief of someone who had finally fulfilled a promise. Inside, a single reading room glowed beneath warm lamps, and one person was already waiting. They initially thought the missing messages and altered files were isolated errors, but the more they looked into it, the more obvious the pattern became. In secret, without telling anyone, they started gathering evidence because they were afraid it would vanish if it was discovered too soon. I was powerless to stop what had happened, they acknowledged with genuine regret, but I made a self-promise to keep the truth safe until the most important day. Then they set one last archive box on the table, which contained something far more valuable than any additional evidence against anyone, every unaltered memory that had survived the confusion, including original photos, voice recordings, birthday videos, travel itineraries, small handwritten notes, and unaltered fragments of your true story. Stay with this last chapter because the next revelation was about the future, which neither of you thought was still possible, rather than the past. Seeing them one by one was like discovering a completely different version of your own lives, one in which love had quietly continued to exist beneath every misunderstanding.